Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. We know that thousands of books have been written about St. John Paul the Great, one of the most influential popes in modern history, but very little has been said about his predecessor, who, we all know this, only sat on the chair of Peter for about a month. Guernon joins us with a look at his life. Guernon is the author of Love is a Journey, the inspiring life and legacy of Pope John Paul I. It's great to speak with you. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Marcus. I appreciate it.
I want to begin by addressing that it's not much of an elephant in the room, but it's a reality that we all know. John Paul I sat upon the papal throne for all of 33 days, and I believe for those who were alive at the time, it must have been a gut-wrenching experience to have to go through the death of your spiritual father all over again in a conclave for the second time.
It certainly was. For many people like me, it felt as if it were a personal loss, as if someone close to us, a family member, had passed. And John Paul I had this incredible mystique about him. He had drawn hundreds of millions of people who were spellbound by him. That's perhaps the best word I can use. And so when he passed so unexpectedly, it really, really rocked the world.
Can you describe to us in a nutshell, before we do a little bit more of a deep dive, some of the backgrounds that he had? We know that he was a Thomist, he had some Augustinian schooling, but he was also very simple in the way he conducted himself in his pastoral life.
Yes, he was. As a matter of fact, the point you raise is a really salient one, because he, even at the time that he became Pope, he saw himself primarily as a pastor. When he was Bishop of Vittorio Veneto, a very small diocese, people were shocked there because he was always inside the diocese, visiting parishes. As a matter of fact, during his tenure there, he visited all 139 parishes twice. He was very, very close to the people. When he became Patriarch of Venice, a fine example of his closeness to the people and his regard for the poor, the dispossessed, the least among us, was that he ordered that the Patriarch's residence be open at all hours of the day and night. And he welcomed all people. His secretary at the time, Monsignor Senegalia, said that people would come in who were unemployed, poor, people who were mentally challenged, alcoholics, prostitutes, and he met with all of them and provided them with sources of comfort and assistance, got jobs for many of them. And in terms of his simplicity, part of it was something that he had learned early on as a seminarian from the local pastor in his hometown of Canale d'Agordo. But he was also greatly influenced by Saint de Sales, who himself was a very simple man, and he was greatly influenced by him.
Tell us about the historical milieu of the time, both in the church and in the world, of the conclave that elected him.
Well, it was a very difficult time for the church, because it was post-Vatican II, when the church had undergone some major changes. And there was a schism of sorts in the church. There were those people who endorsed the reforms. Luciani was one of those people. But there were also a good many people in the hierarchy of the church who were termed traditionalists or conservatives, who were opposed to those changes. And so when Pope Paul VI died, uh, there was a fear that the conclave would last a long time because of the factions that existed.
Right.
Strangely enough, the conclave that elected Albino Luciani as John Paul I was one of the swiftest in history. He won on the fourth ballot, one day, 25 hours. And a large part of that was that he was considered to be a moderate, someone who was not ideologically rigid. And his personality, his character, his humility really won over cardinals across the spectrum.
And precisely because of that, when you consider his election, it's no surprise to anyone that the cardinals, our father cardinals, believed they had elected a docile, pastoral moderate to the papal chair. And
Correct.
Tell us about him stepping onto the loggia and what that represented.
Well, it was interesting because he did not want to be pope. Mm-hmm. He did not expect to become pope, and that was true, by the way, throughout his career because he initially refused to become bishop, but Pope John insisted on it. So when he first appeared on the central balcony of St. Peter's as pope, he looked a little nervous at first, and then that magical moment when he burst into this radiant smile that seemed to light up the entire piazza of St. Peter's, it's as if he underwent a very rapid transformation, and the crowd went wild. And the amazing thing about it is that he wanted to speak, but it was not tradition at that time for popes to speak at their first appearance. And so the only thing that he said was giving the blessing.
Right.
And so we really didn't have much of an idea of who this man was. He was well known in the northern part of Italy, but outside of that, he was pretty obscure. But even during that brief moment, it was electric. There was an American woman there who was present who had seen 5 popes in person, and she said she had never experienced anything like this. And the effect that brief appearance had probably is best exemplified by the fact that the next day when he delivered his first Angelus, it was estimated that up to 250,000 people showed up. It was just amazing.
Right. If you don't mind, I'd like to step back just a little to talk about the confusing circumstances of the smoke that you rightly highlight in your book.
Yes.
Just share with us what happened.
Okay, so basically it's an ancient way to announce whether a pope has been elected or not. What happens is that
black smoke for
I'm sorry?
Our listeners are familiar with the black smoke and white smoke, but tell us what happened at the ballot electing Pope John Paul I.
Okay, so what happened is that there was massive confusion because as the smoke first started coming out, it appeared dark. And people reached the conclusion, including the journalists who were covering it, thought, it's black smoke, we don't have a pope. And yet, as the smoke continued to come out, it was changing colors, and it would turn light, and so on. And so there was great confusion in the piazza. Some people had started leaving, thinking, well, I'll come back tomorrow when a pope might have been elected.
Right.
So
let's pause there on a cliffhanger because we're hearing the music. We'll continue with Mo Guernon on the other side of the break about the election of Pope John Paul II, and we want to talk about his life, his legacy, what we remember from him, and despite his short time on the papal chair, what he taught us. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter. afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter and I'm talking with Mo Guernon, who is the author of Love is a Journey, the inspiring life and legacy of Pope John Paul I. So, Mo, we left on a cliffhanger about the confusion. There was initially black smoke, and then you said the smoke seemed to change color, but by this point, many people had dispersed from St. Peter's Square.
Correct. And so what eventually happened is an announcement was made to the crowd to concentrate their gaze on the central balcony. And at that point, it took about 46 minutes from the time he went into the room of tears to change into his papal garments until the time that Cardinal Felici announced his election. And then, of course, he came out and it was bedlam.
It was bedlam. That's an interesting way to describe it. Now, to jump ahead then, because we already spoke about the moment at the Loggia, the next day at his Wednesday address, and then the following days after, it became very clear that the passive, pastorally quiet moderate that many cardinals assumed he was not Pope John Paul I. He came out guns a-blazing. He showed himself to be a bold shepherd.
Yes, he did. And I don't think that you can underestimate some of the things that he did that were unconventional. For example, he was the first pope, I should say, to take a double name, John Paul, in honor of his two immediate predecessors, whom he admired greatly. In his first Angelus, the day after he appeared as pope, he spoke extemporaneously. He used the first person I instead of the royal we. That had never been done by a pope before. Right. So there was great informality there. He joked, he smiled, he used anecdotes. He spoke about his own fear when he said the moment of danger was arriving for him, meaning that it was becoming clear that he would get elected. He initially refused to use the sedia gestatoria, that portable throne that popes were carried about on the shoulders of Vatican employees. He thought that the papacy ought to be closer to the people, that it should not be a majestic type of position. And in line with that, of course, he eliminated the crowning. So at his installation, instead of wearing the triple tiara that was embedded with all kinds of jewels, he simply accepted the lamb's wool pallium, signifying his role as bishop.
Right. Tell us about how his relatives, and especially his brother, dealt with the newfound global scrutiny, especially from the media.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, Marcus, because there's a great story about that. His brother, with whom he was very, very close, of course, came from the small town. About 1,000 people were living there at the time. And he was a man, apparently, who spoke his mind. And, of course, when his brother became pope, the international press corps, the media, just descended on that little village, inundated it. And they, of course, wanted to speak with the people who were closest to the new pope. And Berto, as he was known, was one of them. And he got so fed up with it that he made a statement, and I'm paraphrasing, but essentially it was this. He said, it's a very difficult job to be pope, but it's even more difficult to be a pope's brother. There's so many people from the press pestering me here that I would like to send them all to the devil. But what would my brother say about that?
So, considering all of that, I will say this. When he came out, especially at that Wednesday address at the ending, John Paul I mentioned he had neither the acumen of Pope John the 23rd, nor the class and culture of Paul VI. But
Correct.
But then he goes on to say, but here I am as their successor. He would, however, go on to demonstrate that he truly had both in spades. And so tell us about how brilliantly and carefully he handled diplomatic relations on behalf of the Catholic Church with the world, including the United Nations.
Well, again, he had so little time in office that there was very limited opportunities for him to engage. Mm-hmm. But from the very first address that he gave the morning after the conclave that elected him, he set out a rather ambitious agenda, and one of them was to promote peace. And so, for example, at the time, President Carter in Washington was negotiating a peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. And repeatedly, the Pope talked about praying for the success of what became known as the Camp David Accords. He met with the international press. He met with, after his installation, he met with all of the foreign ministers, heads of state, and such dignitaries from around the world that were there, tried to get to know them, relied heavily on Cardinal Villot, who was Secretary of State.
Right.
And he was making overtures to various denominations, and also his primary international commitment was to attempt to reconcile people, whether they were of different faiths, different ethnic groups, from different geographical areas. He believed that we ought to know, as he said, we ought to know each other.
Right.
And that, of course, implied that we need to respect each other. And that was true as individuals and also as communities and nations.
Ecumenism was one of the main thrusts of the Second Vatican Council, with the end goal of reunification with the Catholic Church. And so his diplomatic tact was such a continued spirit in light of that movement. I also want to ask you to comment on some of the global theological currents that were happening at the time, like liberation theology. He had dealt with that in Venice, and now as Pope, he dispatched perhaps the sharpest mind he had in his care to answer that in South America, in Latin America.
Yeah, yes, that's correct. He had sent Cardinal Ratzinger, who became, of course, Benedict XVI, to deal with that. And as you point out quite correctly, he had direct experience with that when he was a cardinal. One of the interesting things about his opposition to liberation theology was that he really, in his own career and his service to the church, believed in social justice. He believed that there should be equity. He was critical of the excesses of capitalism, for example. He proposed that parishes should give 1% of their income to people in poor countries. And yet, he was very concerned that priests remain within the confines of their role as priests and not become political leaders as such,
right.
Even if, in fact, much of their agenda was in sync with his commitment to the poor. So yes, he was opposed to liberation theology. He deeply had reservations about Marxism, which of course was an atheist philosophy. And though he embraced some elements of socialism, he thought that what a priest had to do was to be a priest and attend to his flock, to teach the catechism, to teach the good news of the gospel.
How did he alongside that continued work of the proclamation of the gospel and his continued emphasis for true simplicity, what are some of the ways in which he transformed St. Peter's Square?
St. Peter's Square. Well, I must say that, in the eulogy at his funeral that the dean of the College of Cardinals made, he emphasized that John Paul I revolutionized St. Peter's Square, if you will, at the Wednesday general audiences, at the Angelus that was given every Sunday, because he generated an unprecedented interest in the message of the Gospels as they were related through his homilies and his talks and his speeches. And Cardinal Confalonieri, who delivered the eulogy, said that he passed like a meteor through the heavens that leaves us amazed and astonished. And he said, you look back and he brought back to the church people who otherwise had fallen away or who were on the precipice of losing their faith.
I want to thank you very much, Mo, for making the time to speak with us.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
My guest has been Mo Guernon, author of Love is a Journey, the life and legacy of Pope John Paul II, the First. Thank you for joining us. I'm Marcus Peter.